share a similar, I think somewhat of a similar background, and I know you have an MBA.
Yeah.
So can you just tell me a little bit about that experience and why did you make the decision to go to school for your MBA?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So we do have a lot of similarities. You were in, was it finance for like
Yeah,
the
it was
better part
finance
of,
and technology.
yeah, for like a decade, right? Like for a
For
while.
yeah,
Yeah, so very close. So I was in technology for, probably a decade and a half or so, and going from technician to engineer to management or executive management, my belief was that I had to have the MBA to do that. Even in a small company, I was in a small regional company. I wasn't in
right.
like a huge organization, and I never went full time to school. Undergrad was part time while I worked full time, and then for my MBA, I did an executive MBA just about 3 years ago. So I just did it in 2012. Yeah, 2012. It was a 16-month, super crazy, rigorous every
Right.
Saturday executive MBA, probably much like what you guys have. And I decided to do that because I really thought that's what I needed to get to the next level of management and rising up inside the company that I was in.
So looking back at that experience, is there anything that you would change, or if you were to advise yourself 3 years ago, was there is there anything that you would say to yourself?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. I think that the big thing for me was setting the expectation and the intention of what I wanted to get out of the program.
Hmm.
And what I realize now, and it's going to be different for everybody, and it's not just going to be different for every different person, but I think it's going to be really different too, whether you're a full-time student or a working professional or an executive,
Right.
that there's something different there. And so I think a lot of people go, especially if you're in the working oh, maybe I'll generalize, maybe everybody, one of the reasons they want to get an MBA is just for the letters, right? Just so they can have the title, they can have the credential. And there's nothing wrong with that, but I think having an intention of what you really want to get out of it is really important. So for me, I didn't go in honestly, and this maybe is not popular to say, but I didn't go in honestly looking to learn a lot functionally, right?
Right.
So I did all the courses and did well in all the courses, and knew that in the back of my mind, entrepreneurship is really where I wanted to be anyways. And in fact, by the time, which is funny, by the time I actually went into the MBA program, I had already left corporate and was already an entrepreneur.
Uh-huh.
So that going to get my MBA to rise up in my company already kind of went away. But I said, these skills are skills that I'm sure will help me in entrepreneurship as well. So I went and did the MBA, and honestly, in retrospect, I don't know that the functional skills I learned really helped me that much in my current career, in my entrepreneurship. Not to say it wouldn't in certain areas,
Hmm.
but for me, what was huge was taking advantage of everything else that the college had to offer. And I went to a school called Rollins College, the Cromer Graduate School of Business in Winter Park, Florida, small private school, really highly ranked for a lot of reasons. And one of the reasons I went there too is because the Entrepreneurship Center was very highly ranked. And so for me, the biggest thing I got out of my MBA was taking advantage of the network. And people say a lot, like taking advantage of the network. What does that mean? And does
Right.
that just mean you go to a bunch of lunch and learns and you
Hmm.
get business cards? But it was really about creating relationships. And in the 16 months I was there, I tried my best to create relationships and add value to everybody around me as much as possible. I didn't go shoving a business card in people's faces. I didn't go up to investors that would show up at these, networking events and try to get something from them. I was always trying to give them something to be a value to them. And to me, that's where I got the most return from my MBA, was being with those people and immersing myself in those conversations and creating those relationships. So that was my big takeaway from the MBA, to be honest.
I think that's such a great point in terms of giving value because I think a lot of times students come in and they're like, I don't have anything to give. Like they go to events and like, oh, what do I have to give a partner at EY, when I'm meeting them. So can you talk a little bit more about that? Like how does a student really build relationships and give something of value?
Yeah, it's a great question. And so I think that depending obviously on the level that you're at, there's more or different types of value that you can bring. Where I was in my career at that time, I was able to connect people, which was good because again, the more you build relationships, the more you are able to
Right.
connect people.
Hmm.
And that's huge. Like that's the biggest social currency in the world, is being able to connect other people. Like that's such a huge thing, not as a manipulative technique, but as a real way to build capital and to build your brand. If you're going to build your brand or whatever it is, just to build your network is to really help to connect other people. And so you may be at a place, if you're a full-time student, where you don't have a network to connect people to. And I've had students ask me, I've coached people in the MBA program at the school that I went to, and they would ask me the same thing. What do I have to give them? I'm 22 years old, or I'm 21 years old. What do I have? And there are a lot of things you have. One of the things that may seem counterintuitive, but what I've seen from people who are really successful and really established, the people that typically would show up and be at networking events at a college, they want to give back. Like they're not there to get something, they are there to
Right.
give. And so it's really important that we give them the opportunity to give. And what I mean by that is these people want to share their experiences. They want people to pick their brains. They want people to not stroke their ego, but to extract what it is they have to give. And so you as a student, as even a full-time student who may not have a lot of conventional experience or conventional value to share, can really help them to fulfill their own mission of giving back by being engaged, by being curious, by asking them about their past and asking them how they've gotten to where they are now and what lessons they've learned. They want to share that stuff. And so the more fearful you are of asking those questions because you're focusing on yourself, the less service you're doing to them because they really want to share it with you and help you. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense, and especially when you talk about this, the fear and focusing on yourself, because
Yeah.
it's like when you're just focused on, oh my God, how am I doing? How am I, am I asking them a stupid question? Then it's like the fear just builds up and up and up, and it's like you're like paralyzed all of a sudden.
Yes,
And then when
absolutely.
you focus on helping others, it's like, oh, then it's, there's so much more energy and so much more possibilities. Even the
Oh,
creativity
totally.
comes out.
Totally. And it's funny is so just going in the networking thing for a second, is that something you find that people have a lot of fear around, is like just the networking and talking to people and
I
things
think
like
sometimes
that?
it's even just walking up to somebody and starting a conversation. How do you do that?
Yeah, yeah, and we were talking about this earlier, right? It's like you
Yeah.
said, like, what would you say if you saw your friend walking down the street? Hey, what's up? How's it going? But one trick. So this is a lot of fun, and I still do this. Like I'm not immune to feeling a little bit of anxiety when you first go up and talk to somebody for the first time. Like I think that's really natural, and I
Yeah.
struggled with that a lot growing up, being a really overweight kid, an overweight teenager, an overweight adult until about 5 years ago. I always had a lot of that kind of anxiety. So whenever I'm not focusing on me and I'm focusing on them, it definitely lowers that anxiety. But if I need a tip or a trick or a technique to get over that hump and to really have fun with it, what I've told people to do and what I definitely do myself is when I go to talk to somebody for the first time, I will pretend that I was just cast in the movie of their life story and I have to play them. And so I got to find out everything I can about them because I got to play them in a movie tomorrow.
Uh-huh.
And if I don't really know what makes them tick, I'm not going to be able to play them in the movie. So I want to like really know, like I pretend in my head, I'm going to be you in a movie tomorrow, Tanuja. I better find out everything about what makes you tick and be super curious so I can do you justice. And for me, that's a fun game that I can play and it takes all the focus off me and really just makes it about them.
Right, and even sometimes I say to students, I say, look the person up on LinkedIn and get to
Yeah.
know as much as possible about them. And there, isn't that stalking? And no, it's not stalking if you don't do it in a, if it's not in a creepy way.
Yeah.
Like, you can find, like, go and do some research before you actually meet someone.
Yeah,
And
go stalk them. Forget it. Go to LinkedIn and you know what? Great. Maybe they go to their own LinkedIn page and they see that you've been on their page. Fantastic. When they meet you, if they do recognize you, they're going to say, "Wow, this person cared enough to go look me up." But that's not creepy. That's being prepared.
exactly, because sometimes when I'm interviewing MBA candidates, for example, and they come in and say, I've looked at your LinkedIn profile and I see you're also an alum. I'm like, great, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Because
Yep.
I know that you took the time to actually do your research.
Yeah,
I think that's
totally.
awesome. I'm just gonna switch gears a little here, Jason.
Yeah.
I wanted to focus on students who are struggling to figure it out. So, if you're in an MBA program or you're in an MS program and you're looking around and everybody seems to have it all figured out, right? They
Mm.
know what they want to do, but here you are, you're not sure,
Yep.
but you feel you're forced to choose a path.
Mm.
What would you say to someone like that?
Okay, so there's a few things there. So the first thing is the people that have it all figured out, they're either lying or delusional. So don't believe them for a second when they say they have it all figured out. They have a picture of what they believe is the right path, and that path that they have may have come from somebody else. It may have been drilled into them by a parent or a friend or whatever else. It may not be their vision. It may be their vision. But here's the thing about that. None of that matters to you. Like this is not about them and it's not about what they do or don't have figured out. It's about you. And so just like we were saying with the networking, make it all about them. This is a time where you can make it all about you,
Hmm.
right? You can be a little selfish and self-centered and self-absorbed and just focus on yourself. And so, one of my favorite quotes, and I won't try to recite it because I'll butcher it anyways. Something Steve Jobs said about not being able to connect the dots going forward, only being
Right.
able to connect the dots looking back.
Hmm.
And it's always something I remember when I first saw that quote, I'm like, oh God, this is more like motivational drivel crap. Like it's just like that. It's so stupid. But if I look at where I am today, there is no way I could have predicted any of the things that happened up to this point, or the connections I've made, or the ups that I've had, or the downs that I've had, or the things that did work out or didn't work out. It would be impossible. So for me to think that I need to have it all figured out looking forward now comes from a place of fear. That's all it is. When I try to create my exact path of what I'm going to do for the next 1 year, 5 year, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, it's fear. It's all fear based. And so I don't do that. That's for me. Like I don't begrudge anybody else from doing it. If it serves you, then do it. But for me, that just doesn't seem to work. So what I do instead is I experiment, and I recognize that there are no wrong decisions, right? There may be paths that you decide on or things that you do that don't serve you or ultimately are things that are not ideal for you. That's fine. No decision, unless it's jumping out of an airplane without a parachute, no decision is terminal.
Right. Hmm.
No decision is terminal. Everything. So that's the one part. And the second part of it is that you said something about the students feeling, and I get this because I can talk about this now, not because I'm smart, but because I went through it, right? Like this is not me like speaking from my pedestal. This is me saying like, yeah, this, I know how that feels. That sucks. And what I'll say is that if we feel like we have to have things figured out, we're already on the wrong path, right? If we put the pressure on ourselves that we have to have something figured out, if the mindset is, I must know exactly what I'm doing, nothing creative comes out of that anyways. So even if you could create the perfect path for the next 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, it's not going to come from that quality of thinking, that level of thinking that says, I got to figure this out. Oh my gosh, all the stress, all the pressure. Nothing fun comes from that. And so I'd say do whatever you can to be more relaxed and light and not so serious about what's going on. And then you can have something more creative happen for you. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
definitely. It's why I keep crayons in my office,
Nice. I love
and
it.
I have some. I have some Play-Doh here.
I have rubber chicken pins up there. I have a Mexican mask. I have my robot, my little robot here I love. So yeah. So no, you got to be playful or you'll hate your life.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's such important advice because I think sometimes students are so stuck in their thinking, and I think Einstein was the one who said that you don't solve problems from the same thinking that created it. And
That's
I
right.
think once you step out and you start to do something fun, it just opens up, like again, you start seeing things that you couldn't have seen before when you're just embroiled in this, this type of thinking. So
Yeah.
I think sometimes it's just giving yourself the space.
Absolutely. Slowing down, giving yourself space is sounds so counterintuitive though, and especially to, there's a profile for MBA students, right? And we're not trying to generalize here, but there's a profile. We're type A, we're driven, we're ambitious. We want to make things, we want to get things done. We hustle. Like
Mhm.
that is a fairly common, archetype of an MBA student, no matter what level. If you're full-time or up through executive, is you want to get things done. So for somebody to tell an ambitious, driven, success-oriented person, slow down and create space, and that's where the magic will happen. They're like, shut up. That's going to put me back. Like
Like, what
everybody's,
crap?
yeah, what kind of crap is that? But I'm telling you, and this, I'll tell you just this morning, I was coaching one of my clients who is the co-founder of an 8-figure internet business, right? That's 10 million plus, 8-figure internet marketing business. And the one of the biggest things that she's gotten out of our coaching together is that by slowing down, by actually unplugging and setting aside time, she comes up with the most creative ideas and creates enough energy to then execute on them. So if you think it's like only for like the woo-woo people who meditate in the Himalayas and sell all their belongings and go live in an ashram or something, it's not. People that are out there in the business world creating scalable companies that really create value in the world are taking this same advice and being successful as a result.
Yeah, and I've heard of companies actually doing this with their employees where they would send them, away for a week, either as a conference or training or somewhere to be outside of that environment. And
Yeah.
that way that, that's like when they have the out of the box thinking because
Mhm.
again, you're not in this place where you're just with the same people or thinking about the same things.
Yeah.
You're in some place completely different and you're, opening up to new ideas and all of that. So I think it's just a great way, like just get out of that mindset, get out of that space and see things in a different way.
Yeah, and sometimes disconnect entirely. Like put away the laptops and the screens and the computers and the phones and not even like pen and paper. Like just have some silent time, whether it's actual meditation or it's taking a walk in nature or whatever it is. But have, Brene Brown talks about having purposeful rest. And that never really resonated with me because I'm like, oh yeah, I purposefully rest. I read. And then when I read, it's stuff about personal development. So I'm circling things and I'm dog-earing pages and I'm thinking
Right.
about that. So it's not really purposeful
Right.
rest. So it's really helpful to have purposeful rest in your life if you want the other parts of your life to work, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, and energy management is such a huge thing, right? Because energy, I mean, you have to renew it. You have to take the time to just like slow down and give yourself that, that period to really rest and rejuvenate.
Yeah. Or your body will make you. Like
Yes.
if you don't choose to do it, your body will knock you on your butt and say, if you're not going to listen to my little warnings, I'm just going to give you a neck pain or a stomach ache or a migraine and knock you out. So don't wait for that to happen. Schedule in purposeful downtime to unplug.
Yeah, I
Does that
think
make
that's a great
sense?
exercise. Yeah. I often tell students as well, like in terms of like even sometimes when they're afraid of something, it's like how do you really step out of that little comfort zone
Mm-hmm.
and really just push that boundary a little, like push that boundary a little, and then you'll be living on the full spectrum, because I think a lot of times you're living on this small space on the spectrum because you're not willing to go to one side. You don't have to go to the extreme end, but you can take steps to actually get there.
Yeah, I think it's great you say that though, because I think a lot of people think that when people talk about like breaking through the fear and like getting through your comfort zone, they think it means like you have to go from level 1 to level 10 in one jump. And like
Right.
that's super daunting. Like of course nobody will do that. And there are studies about this, like with Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, the guy who wrote Flow, and he talks about like there's some sweet spot. It's like
I'm
four.
surprised you can actually pronounce that name. I've never been able to pronounce
I
it.
practiced a lot. I practiced for like 6 months. But he talks about there's some sweet spot of like 4%, something that's 4% out of your capabilities is kind of the sweet spot to go for. Not 20%, not 50%, not 100%, and not 1%. But if there's like 4% difference between your abilities and the challenge at hand, that's like the sweet spot to go for that and try that out for yourself.
Right. Just push that comfort zone like a little and just keep
Yeah,
making it bigger and bigger.
exactly, exactly.
And what would you say, how would you advise someone to deal with the external pressures they feel? So whether it's from family or whether it's from your friends, or you look around, your peers and you see them, again, maybe they seem to know what they're doing, and here you are and you're basically scared. You have 2 years to figure it out, or how much ever time you have to figure it out. And it feels like there's all this pressure to get it right.
So, kind of going back to one thing we talked about before is that if you allow yourself to feel that pressure, then you're kind of screwed before you even start. That's just
Hmm.
it's a very ineffective way to start that kind of pressure. It's almost like you're about to run a marathon, and so to warm up, you have a 400-pound gorilla stand on your back. Like that kind of pressure is not gonna help you run the
That
marathon
image.
faster. Yeah, isn't that a great image? Yeah, I picture like this big hairy
I'm
crazy
like
gorilla.
105 pounds. I can't imagine.
You wouldn't even be standing, you'd be flat on the ground. So pressure just never helps. Like being really serious and really pressure filled, it's just not effective. Like it's not right or wrong, it's just not effective, at least not for me. So if being super serious is effective for you, then do it. If it really serves you, then do it. My guess is it typically doesn't serve you. So when we look at external pressures, it's such it's something that we say in passing, like it's just a given, like, oh yeah, there's all these pressures from the outside, it's my parents or my friends or my whatever. And I think the key word there is that it's external, right? And we can't control external circumstances. There is no way to do that. We spend a lot of our time trying, and that's where the suffering comes from, and that's where the stress comes from, and that's where the struggle comes from. But if we recognize instead that all we have the ability to do is be a leader within our own lives, right? To lead ourselves, to not try to change other people, to not try to get them to see things our way, to not try to get them to accept or approve or validate our path and what we're doing, but instead recognize that feeling that way, feeling that pressure, whether it's from a friend or a family member or a school or whatever, is a choice. And so the sooner that you can say, you know what, I understand there are people out there that have expectations of me. I understand there are people that may be trying to project onto me something that they maybe weren't able to do, or trying to protect me from doing something that they think is going to be detrimental to my future. And none of that stuff matters. And it's very, very important for all of us to take ownership of the decisions we make and the path that we're on, knowing that, again, going back to what we said before, there are no bad decisions. There's nothing that's going to be terminal. So I guess I'm kind of going around the question back and forth, so I don't know if that's a good enough answer, but the key is, to me, is to really look inward at what it is you're doing, and what it is that makes you happy, or what is exciting to you, or what you would like to try out and experiment, and just leave all the other crap behind, because all it does is weigh you down.
Mm-hmm. So if I came to you and I said, Jason, I am not sure what career path to choose. I have all of these options in front of me. Well, how would you advise me to pick one?
Yeah, so the first thing I would say, which of them sound fun?
Mm-hmm.
Which of them sound fun? And you can replace fun with anything. Which of them sound fun or exciting or interesting or challenging or a little scary? Like, which of them evokes some kind of emotion, right? Because if I see so many times that a lot of times when, and I was going to say students, but really this is not students only, when people are evaluating choices, they try to analyze their way to the solution. Right. And there is absolutely a place for the analytical processing mind. I mean, for anything that has a programmed response, the analytical mind is where it's at, because that's where we process things. But when we process things with our analytical mind, we use rationale, we use reason, we use intellect, and we use our history, our memory.
Mm-hmm.
And so trying to guess on a path or choose something in the future based solely on your past experiences really limits you. It's very limiting. So what we want to do is kind of say, yes, I understand. I'll bring the rational, analytical, processing part of my mind in when it's appropriate. But let me kind of take that out of the equation and really relax into this and say, which of these things is interesting? Which of these things evokes some kind of emotion in me, good, bad, or indifferent? And let's explore that a little bit. So if you can't find something in one of the, like if the only redeeming quality about one of the choices is that it has a huge salary, doesn't mean to take it off the table, but I would dig a little deeper and see what else is going to keep you there besides the money. What else is going to keep you there besides the stature or the benefits or whatever else is there? What actually fires you up inside about thinking about working for that company?
Yeah, and I think earlier you mentioned that, treating this as an experiment.
Yeah.
So going out there and having like these mini experiments, like, and really seeing where you feel alive. What is it that really, makes you feel like, okay, I'm using my strengths, or I feel like, this is something that I could be doing for 10 years. And you talk about that state of flow as well earlier.
Yeah.
So I think it's like just running these experiments and seeing and talking to people, going out there, networking, talking to people, about maybe there's a field that you're interested in and you don't know anything about. Like, how can you connect with someone and ask them about, that area?
Yeah, I think that's great. So I'm glad you brought that up, because I was thinking the same thing about going back to the networking. Is this is a great opportunity if you do have several opportunities in front of you or several paths, is start talking to people, right? Like have informational interviews or do whatever you need to do to get in touch with these people and ask them the real questions. The questions like, what do you love most about this career, and what can you not stand? What do you like, stomp your feet at when it happens? And you've been in this career for 20 years. What's changed over the past 20 years that's been really just, shocking to you? And where do you see this movement or this company or this industry going in the next 5 years? Like really dig in and see, based on their responses, you may see even more excitement come up and more engagement and more enthusiasm. And that could be a good sign that that's something else to look at. Or you may feel less, or you may feel kind of indifferent. And that's something to pay attention to also.
Yeah, I think the self-awareness part is so key. Just like getting to know yourself and knowing what's right for you, as opposed to, because again, there's a lot of external forces, that you speak to 5 different people and you get 5 different sets of advice. So how do you know which one to choose? So at the end of the day, it's like knowing what sits or what resonates for you and making choices based on that.
Absolutely. Yeah, finding the aspects of whatever the work is that really align with the things that energize you. So even if it's not, because you can't even know like if a job itself inside of a certain company is going to be right for you. There's no way to know that until you work there. But if you see there are aspects of the job even that, 5 out of the 7 things you're going to be doing for that job are things that really feel like they'll challenge you and allow you to stretch and allow you to contribute or whatever's important to you, then I think, again, that's a good gauge to say, let me look into that a little more and see where there may be something really cool for me.
Yeah, and I think that's the keyword, stretch.
Yeah,
stepping outside of that comfort zone
absolutely.
and
Absolutely.
playing there. Yeah.
Yeah, and playing, yeah, being playful, having a little robot and playing. Yeah, absolutely.
Any other tip you have, Jason, on somebody who's like trying to figure out their career path?
You know, I just think that experimentation is huge, and I didn't do that. I went into IT very young because I was interested in technology, and I still am. I'm still a geek at heart. I mean, I love technology. I was attracted to the money of it, and I eventually ended up in IT consulting, and there were a lot of great things that I loved about that too, because there was, for me, there was novelty, there was working with new clients all the time, there were challenging technical situations, there was, being face to face with people, not being like in a cube where I didn't talk to anybody. And for me, I knew those were the things that lit me up, right? Those are the things that energized me. And even still, even with all those things in place, and even though I was making, six figures in my 20s being in this industry, it still ultimately wasn't the thing that I wanted to do the rest of my life. And it's never too late to make a change in that. So if you need more proof that any decision you make is not terminal, I spent nearly 15 years of my life. Tanuja spent 10 years of her life. And we still decided that, hey, at this point, even though it seems like we're all in, and so there's no way you can change now because you're way too invested. And in MBA talk, it's the sunk cost of all this time you've put into your career. You can always change. You can always pivot. You can always take your energy and put it in a new direction with something that energizes you more now that maybe didn't exist 5 or 10 years ago. So at the end of the day, no terminal decisions, just experimentation and play and fun.
Exactly, because you don't really know what the future holds, and as you said, connect the dots by looking back
Exactly.
and follow those patterns. So
Yeah.
thank you very much, Jason. So someone watching this, how can they find out more about your work or follow you?
Well, I mean, talking about all this passion stuff, I'm homeless, so you'll see me on the corner. No, I'm just kidding. I'll be holding up a
We can
sign.
just follow you
Yeah, just follow me
physically.
around. Like people say, follow me on Twitter. No, follow me on the street. Like I'll be walking on the street. No, I mean best. I hang out on Facebook. That's kind of my place. So you can actually go to. I made it very easy. www.facebookjason.com, and it'll take you right to my Facebook page, and you can connect with me there and see all the stuff I'm doing. And if you
You're
want to
the only
laugh,
Jason?
yeah,
Are you?
Facebook Jason. Yeah, if you go to facebookjason.com, it just
Oh,
redirects you right to, because it was so hard. I'm like, oh, search for Jason Goldberg, and then you'll see the profile picture. I have glasses, and there's some other Jason Goldberg with glasses, and it was just too much. So facebookjason.com. And if you want to laugh and kind of learn something at the same time around this whole realm of the things we've been talking about today, I also host an online TV show with a guy named Steve Chandler, who we're both very familiar with, and that's at thenotsoseriouslife.com. So feel free to check that out too.
fantastic. Thank you so much, Jason.